Alright, guys. So this is another Patreon request, and this one comes from my good friend, the Mount Vernon Kid. Chris, thank you so much for continued patronage. And as always, if you guys like to have a Patreon request done, just hit the link below. Head on over to my Patreon where you guys can hit the 4th tier, and then start sending me requests for videos to do here on YouTube. But other than that, hope you all enjoy this, and let's get started with the video. So, one of the requests that Chris sent me was actually a pretty fun one. It's actually one that you could actually see happen. Like, it's actually one you could actually, in theory, actually see happen in comic books from DC Comics and Dynamite, and that is the Lone Ranger and Jonah Hex. Which actually, like I just said, like, it's a crossover you could legit see happen. It's like, it's so easy to do. Like, it's in theory, it's actually like a plausible crossover. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a very plausible, it's a very plausible idea. Anyway, so let's get started with this comic, with this story. Excuse me. So this story takes place, of course, in the Old West, and it starts off with the Lone Ranger and Tonto coming upon, basically they've been contacted by a village on the Mexican border, and basically they're like, we've heard stories about you, the great Lone Ranger and his sidekick Tonto. We've heard, all these great, magnificent stories about you, but we have a major problem. That problem is that we are plagued by this railroad company that is terrorizing us to get out of the way, and we can't stop them. We're being forced out of our homes. We're being driven. We are being driven to the brink, and we don't know what to do. Can you help us? They're just like, please, Lone Ranger, we need your help. Well, and the Lone Ranger, of course, is like, of course, I can help you. Tonto and I will assist you in any way we can. We will stop this. We'll stop these people and keep your home safe. Well, it turns out that the people that this train company, this railroad company, has hired to cause this ruckus in this town is a very notable DC character in the Old West. That being Quentin Turnbull. Yeah, that was a character from the movie, but he was a character in the comics first. So Quentin Turnbull was hired. He and his crew of ex-Confederate soldiers were hired to drive out this Mexican village so they can build a railway through it. And of course, Turnbull, being the racist Confederate piece of shit that he is, was all about it. So every night he would be out terrorizing this town. He would just be he and his men would be constantly terrorizing them. Not only that, these guys are well trained. They're Confederate guerrilla soldiers. So they are. So at night when they come, they almost get the drop on Lone Ranger. Had it not been for Tonto actually getting the drop, actually figuring out, oh shit, we're getting ambushed. So it was Tonto who actually alerted the Ranger, hey, we're under shit, we're under attack. We gotta move. We gotta go. So that's what happens, is that they almost get killed, by Turnbull and his men, and Turnbull is like, I've heard stories about the Lone Ranger. I heard all these great stories about the Lone Ranger and how he had righted wrongs and things like that. Personally, you don't. I don't think you live up to the legend. And he's like, one of the reasons why you don't kill people. And the Ranger reaches for his gun. Turnbull actually has one of his snipers hit Ranger in the hand, and it cripples him. And Turnbull and his men are just like, this is too easy. The Lone Ranger's gonna die by my hand. If only someone else was here to see it. And that's when a gunshot rings out, and they're like, yeah, somebody is. And it turns out that it's Hex. Hex isn't here out of the good kindness of his heart. But we'll get to the reason why in a moment. But when Turnbull sees Hex, he's like, you. And he's like, yep, Me, I'm about to put a bullet through your head. So Turnbull gets away before, but Hex does kill several of his men, and he runs back to it, and they flee into the night. However, Hex and Tonto help the Lone Ranger into a wagon, and they're patching him up, and he's like, "You're Jonah Hex," and Lone Ranger's like, "You're Jonah Hex. Like, what brings you to why are you here? You're a bounty hunter," and he's like, "I am." And someone posted a bounty for Quentin Turnbull, dead or alive. I know I'm going to make a lot less for dead, but it's going to feel a lot better. And he's like, so you're not here to help these people? He's like, no, sir, I'm here to help myself. And he's like, of course, I've heard stories about it. Lone Ranger already is like, you're a killer, you're a murderer, and you're a bounty hunter who has no morals. And he's like, I got morals. It's called getting money. But Hex points out, look, I know Turnbull. Like, I know him better than, I know him better than either of you do. I know how he thinks. I know how he fights. I was one of his men. You see this mark on my face? Yeah. It's his fault. So, he's like, I can help you get Turnbull, but when this is over, I kill him. And they're like, and Lone Ranger's no. It says, no, we're going to bring him in alive, and he's going to face justice. And he's like, well, guess we'll have to see who shoots him first. So the Jonah Hex begrudgingly teams up with Lone Ranger and Tonto, and the group heads out to face Turnbull and his men. Turnbull and his remaining crew that weren't killed by Hex go back to the railroad head of the railroad company, and he's like, look, you didn't look, we've got a major problem. Three major problems. Their names are the Lone Ranger, Tonto, and Jonah Hex. So he's like, if you want my help to get rid of these people, you're gonna have to A, up the ante, and B, you're gonna have to give me some firepower to put up with them. And he's like, well, we weren't expecting either the Lone Ranger. We're anticipating Hex given your history, but the Lone Ranger was something we were not expecting. However, we'll give you a hand in this endeavor, because if the Lone Ranger's involved, that's bad. Lone Ranger and Jonah Hex, yeah. So they give them Gatling guns. They give them heavy duty Gatling guns, and they give them more men, more heavily armed men, so they can ride out and destroy the village and kill all three of their opponents at once. So they all ride out. However, Hex is like, I already know he's already gonna go cry back to his employers and be like, oh, we need more men and guns. But here's the trick. He's gonna be so focused on that, he's not even gonna think about, he's not even gonna give a second thought about, he's not gonna give a second thought about, Turnbull gets so fucking arrogant about firepower and safety in numbers. He won't even realize that he's being thrown into a bad situation. So Turnbull gets lured. So Tonto and Hex go off to lure Turnbull into like a gorge with a steep rocky cliff, and that's where Lone Ranger is like aiming a rifle, and he's like, and he shoots a rock and he hits it in the precise point, because that's how good of a marksman the Lone Ranger is. He hits it, and the boulders start coming down and cuts them off, and that's when Hex just starts firing away at people, and he's like, no, you swore you weren't going to kill anyone, Hex, and he's like, I lied. And then it comes down to him and Turnbull, and he already shot Turnbull in the leg, and he's like, I have waited ages to kill you. And that's when his gun gets shot out of his... Lone Ranger shoots the gun out of his hand. He's like, boy, if you knew what this man did to me. And he's like, I know what he did to you, but he needs to face justice. You said dead or alive, so just take him in alive. And he's like, I'm willing to make less money for his hide. He's like, I'm not going to let you kill this man. Neither Tonto or I are going to let you kill this man. He's like, All right, fight you both. And that's when he just takes out a hatchet and he's like, come on then. So Hex fights Lone Ranger and Tonto, and though it's 2 against 1, Hex holds his own because, yeah, he's well trained. Remember, Hex is a guy who even Batman couldn't beat in a fight. Yeah, that's happened. So Hex is fighting them head on, but during all this, Turnbull gets away again, and Hex is left with no money and no vengeance, and he's like, boys, I'm happy we saved that town, but it's best you don't come within 100 yards of me for the rest of your lives. So he gets on his horse, rides off to chase after Turnbull, but Lone Ranger is like, even though we couldn't stop Turnbull and stop Hex from killing people, we did save that town. So we can take solace in that. So there you go, guys. That is my Lone Ranger Jonah Hex crossover. Once again, I'd like to thank my good friend Chris for sending me this Patreon request, as well as the others. And like I said earlier, if you guys would like to have a Patreon request done, just hit the link below, head on over to my Patreon. You guys hit the 4th tier and start sending me requests for videos to do here on YouTube. But other than that, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.